11 lawyers failed, but a janitor solved it in 2 minutes. What the CEO did next shocked everyone. Before we dive into this incredible true story, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from today? And when you're done, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Now settle in. This one's going to surprise you. It was chaos. A glass of water had just spilled on the polished marble floor of the Hayes and Lee boardroom, triggering a request for the janitor. But no one expected that this small accident would lead to a moment that would silence a room full of top legal minds. Lena Morales, the cleaning staff on duty, was called in to mop up the mess. She walked in quietly, pushing her cleaning cart. Her old Garfield t-shirt, faded and clearly not office attire, hinted that she hadn't planned to be working this late. She was there simply to clean, or so they thought. As she knelt near the corner of the room, wiping up the small puddle with practiced efficiency, the storm raged above her. Damon Hayes, the cold, calculated CEO of Hayes and Lee, had his hand pressed against his forehead, visibly agitated. Around him, 11 high-powered lawyers were locked in a heated debate. Voices clashing, fingers pointing, legal jargon flying through the air. They were all gathered around one issue: Clause 38B in a billion-dollar contract with the Renshaw Group. If they couldn't find a way around the single clause, the deal would fall apart. And worse, the company could lose the trust of the entire market. And to a man like Damon Hayes, trust was worth far more than money. "This clause is a legal trap," one lawyer muttered grimly. "It's airtight. There's no wiggle room," said another. Damon exhaled sharply, frustration burning behind his sharp gray eyes. "So this is what Ivy League tuition gets me? Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and nothing to show for it." Lena said nothing. She continued to clean quietly, her mop gliding across the floor as if floating. She tried not to listen, but she couldn't help noticing the scribbled notes on the whiteboard, the panicked voices, and especially the contract clause that everyone seemed to be circling around like vultures. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost casual. "That doesn't look like a locked clause to me. Looks more like a structural issue. It's written backward, according to the logic in Article 127 of the Federal Contract Code." Silence. It hit the room like a sudden blackout. Every voice fell silent. 11 well-dressed heads turned slowly. Even Damon looked up. His sharp gray eyes landed on her, the woman in faded jeans and sneakers now adjusting her cleaning bucket. "How do you know that?" he asked, his voice low, unreadable. Lena didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eye. "Because I read it. It's in one of the books I have at home." "What kind of book?" "Civil and contract law," she replied smoothly. "I have a full set. A retired professor who used to live in my neighborhood gave them to me. I read a chapter every night after my son goes to bed." One lawyer let out a condescending chuckle. Another scoffed, shaking his head. "With all due respect," one of them said pointedly, "this is a professional setting." Lena didn't lose her smile. "Sure. And if I got something wrong, please let me know. But if it's just the uniform that's the problem, I can wear a suit tomorrow. I accidentally bought one thinking it was a hoodie." Damon stared at her like she was speaking in code. A janitor quoting legal clauses? Was this real? "Did you study law?" he asked. "I did," Lena said softly. 3 years. I was just 1 year away from my degree. But life got in the way. Bills don't wait, and I had to start working. But I never stopped reading. I just never got the diploma." There was a shift in the room. You could feel it. Damon stood slowly, his expression unreadable. He walked past the circle of lawyers as if they weren't even there, stopping just a few feet from Lena. "Repeat what you said. Clearly. In full detail." Lena placed her mop to the side and crossed her arms. Clause 38B was structured to depend on the conditional paragraph in Section 14. But that structure contradicts Article 127 of the Federal Code. That creates a legal ambiguity, a door for the clause to be voided, especially if you present it under the precedent set in Garvin versus Dakota Energy, 2019. Dead silence. No one laughed this time. No one spoke. Not even a breath. For the first time in years, Damon Hayes's expression cracked. And what happened next would change everything. Previously, the boardroom fell silent when Lena, a humble janitor, dissected a contract flaw that 11 lawyers had missed. Now, the CEO who once ignored her was finally listening. No judgment in his voice, but Damon Hayes was clearly seeing something that didn't fit the perfectly labeled folders and clean spreadsheets that ruled his world. "You read the Garvin versus Dakota case twice?" he asked. Lena nodded. The defense's argument was sharp. Brilliant, actually, but I would have chosen a different quote to end it with. That final line? It was weak. One of the lawyers scoffed, trying to reassert control. That can't be right. The case was analyzed by experts. Maybe she's just mixing up some legal terms. Lena gave a small shrug. Then check it again. Page 197, Volume 2 of Professor March's series. Great reading material. Especially after dinner. Damon crossed his arms, his face caught somewhere between disbelief and curiosity. For the first time that day, he didn't look frustrated or tired. He looked intrigued. "What's your name?" "Lena Morales." He gave a short nod. "Miss Lena Morales, let's talk in my office." She blinked, unsure. "But the floor's still wet." He turned to the lawyers. "Then walk around it. Or is that too much to ask?" The meeting ended in a stunned hush. Lena, still not sure whether she was walking toward a punishment or a promotion, pushed her cleaning cart into the hallway with a crooked smile tugging at her lips. Damon's office felt different. Like even the air understood it wasn't a place for small talk. Every piece of furniture stood like it had a purpose and permission to be there. Lena entered with her cart, but stopped at the door. She left it outside, not because anyone told her to, but because she instinctively knew this wasn't about cleaning floors anymore. Inside, Damon stood at his desk, holding a sleek tablet. On the screen, a dense legal clause, layered with commas and phrased like a bureaucratic maze. He didn't offer small talk. Instead, he simply gestured toward a chair. Lena glanced at it. It looked like something from a courtroom drama, elegant and out of reach. She sat cautiously, adjusting her Garfield t-shirt, which now felt more out of place than ever. A cat at a courtroom table. "This clause," Damon began, "was used as a model in a merger between two energy firms in Florida. One of our lawyers thinks it could help us. What do you think?" Lena leaned in, scanning the clause with surprising ease. Her eyes moved as though reading a familiar recipe. After a moment, she leaned back. "If the goal is to confuse readers, it works. It's loaded with technical terms, but it hides the real point behind 5 subjunctive clauses and a couple of ambiguities. Honestly, it's a trap, and not even a clever one." Damon raised a brow. "Explain." The phrase transfer of contractual responsibility appears before the conditional clause. That structure directly conflicts with Article 21 of the Civil Code. A sharp judge would interpret that as intentional omission. "You memorized legal articles?" "No," she said simply. "I understand how they work. The number is just the address. It's what's inside that matters." Damon looked at her. Not like a janitor, not even like a failed law student, but like a new piece on a chessboard. One that had suddenly become the most powerful in play. He tapped the tablet and pulled up a second document. "This one's an asset protection clause. In case of unilateral termination." Lena glanced at it, shook her head almost instantly. "That's already been tossed out of court, at least 3 times. Most recently in Rowan versus Palms Trading 2021. The judge ruled it violated the principle of good faith. Said you can't hide legal risks behind decorative fine print." Damon's voice dropped, more intrigued than defensive. 3 of my best lawyers approved that clause." Lena gave a wry smile. "Then maybe they need to read more books and fewer recycled templates." For a moment, only the muffled sounds of traffic outside filled the room. And then something unexpected happened. Damon laughed. It wasn't loud or long, but it was real. A quiet, startled kind of laughter, as if something in his world had just tipped off balance. "You're unexpected," he said. "I get that a lot, especially on deep cleaning days. He turned to his desk, picked up a thick blue folder, and placed it in front of her. This is the full contract we're trying to protect. If Renshaw manages to invalidate Clause 38B, they could unravel the whole agreement. That would be catastrophic. Lena opened the folder, brows furrowing as she scanned the last section. You're missing a generic safeguard in the contract's closing section. A cautious lawyer would have included it automatically. Sometimes the smartest people forget the basics. Damon narrowed his eyes. Are you suggesting my lawyers were careless? I'm saying, she answered carefully, that sometimes vanity replaces caution, and when that happens, the contract ends up bloated with ego and lacking in protection. He stared at her. Not coldly, but as if trying to understand where all of this came from. You studied law but didn't finish? 3.5 years, she said quietly. I had to make a choice between a diploma and putting milk in the fridge. My ex said he wasn't ready to be a father. But the baby came anyway. And books don't cry at night, you know? So I studied when I could. And I worked when I had to. After revealing the sacrifices behind her unfinished law degree, Lena left Damien speechless. Not with drama, but with sheer, quiet brilliance. He nodded slowly. No judgment in his expression. Just realization. You know you can't act as a lawyer, he said plainly. That's illegal. I know, Lena replied without hesitation. I'm not going to sign anything or show up in court, but I can observe, think, suggest. That's still allowed, right? Damon turned away, walking toward the tall windows that overlooked the city skyline. From up here, the lights of the city used to seem sharp, bright, and predictable. But now, they looked dull compared to the brilliance of the mind he'd just uncovered, right under his own roof. Still facing the window, he said it quietly. I need you. Lena didn't react right away. She simply crossed her legs and leaned back a little, calm and composed, almost like a secret agent being briefed on a covert mission. More like a strategic ally, she said. But let's be clear. If anyone finds out you're taking legal advice from a cleaning lady, this could turn into a scandal, or worse, a corporate soap opera. Damon turned around, eyes sharp. So, you'll be my cleaner of confidential clauses. Then, she stood up, grabbed her mop bucket, and gave a sly smile. As long as I don't have to wear high heels. My uniform says it all. Lena started her new, unofficial role just as she always had. Sneakers worn thin, same old Garfield t-shirt. But now there was one addition to her toolkit, a hard-covered notebook. Inside, she scribbled everything. Lawyers' names, complex legal phrases, ideas sparked during her cleaning rounds. Nothing flashy, nothing formal. Just pure observation and razor-sharp thought. Damon had been clear no one could know. Officially, she was still just the janitor assigned to the administrative wing. But in reality, she had quietly become something much more. She was the invisible thread tying loose ends together, the uncredited mind behind decisions that even the company's high-paid legal team couldn't make alone. Her unofficial work began the following Tuesday. Damon, passing her in the hallway, discreetly handed her a draft email, meant for a top-tier consulting firm. The wording was technical but clumsy. It sounded unsure. Lena read it, scratched her chin thoughtfully, and asked, Mind if I tweak it a little? He shrugged. Go ahead. She sat, typed with surprising speed, then handed the laptop back. Her revision read, based on the interpretive safeguard clause in the contract signed by both parties, and backed by Federal Law Article 64C, we believe the proposed contract revision lacks sufficient legal basis, and therefore is not advisable. Sincerely, P.S. If you disagree, we're happy to discuss it over coffee. Just bring cookies. Damon blinked. Cookies? Technical term, she smirked. It lightens the tone. They'll laugh, but they'll know you're serious. He said nothing. He just clicked, send. From then on, Lena became the company's best-kept secret. One lawyer left a post-it on Damon's door. Does the cross-compensation clause apply to services? She responded with a folded note left by the coffee machine. Only if it's clearly stated. Even then, beware of Article 92B. No one knew where the sharp advice was coming from, but they started noticing the effects. Mistakes? Fewer and farther between. Meetings? Shorter and more effective. And those awkward legal questions once shouted in hallways? They were now whispered over coffee machines. By the third day, Lena sat quietly in the break room, writing notes in her notebook. Two lawyers walked in, deep in conversation. "Hayes is acting different," one said. "Sharper, more direct. And the strange part? He's doing it without us." "Maybe he brought in an outside consultant," the other replied. "Or a legal crystal ball." Lena smiled, eyes still on her notebook. So far, no one suspected a thing. But that was about to change. The moment came that Friday. Alexander Rios, young, arrogant, and with an ego big enough to require its own assistant, stormed into the back office. There was Lena, calmly typing at Damien's desk. "What are you doing?" he snapped. She looked up, unfazed. "Replying to a legal email about a merger and a reversibility clause." "Want to take a look?" He marched forward, red with indignation. "This is a violation of company protocol. You're not even allowed to touch this system. You're a cleaning lady." Lena didn't blink. She took a deep breath, her posture steady. Not defensive, not angry, just centered. "Anyone can read the law," she said. "But understanding its soul? That's something only those who study beyond the page can do." Alexander frowned. "That's not in the legal code." "No," she said quietly. "It's from the preface of Professor March's textbook. The same professor who teaches your graduate course." Silence. The kind of silence that says everything. From that day forward, whispers followed her in the halls. They didn't know her name, but she became known as the voice in the footnotes. And the more Damien consulted her, quietly, discreetly, the more the mystery grew. One afternoon, a document landed on Damien's desk. It was a legal threat, a letter designed to intimidate, worded with heavy-handed aggression. Damien didn't call his legal team. He simply walked into his office and handed it to Lena. She read it, thought for a few minutes, and drafted a reply, direct, precise, and with just the right touch of ironic edge. After Lena defused a threatening legal letter with nothing but wit and clarity, Damien knew. This woman wasn't just helping the company. She was protecting it. Her reply had been short and sharp. "However, we believe there's no need for legal theatrics or imaginary contractual ghosts. Our team, visible or not, is prepared for any move with respect and without fear." Damien read it in silence. Then, for the first time in public, he smiled. Later that week, during a quick break, Lena walked past a glass-walled meeting room where two interns were locked in a tense debate over whether to trigger a joint liability clause in a partnership agreement. Still walking, Lena called out without stopping, "It depends on how the bond was formed." The two men blinked, then looked at each other. "What do you mean?" one of them called out. She paused, turned back with a casual smile. "If joint responsibility was created by written agreement, then yes, it applies. But if it's only assumed through interpretation, you risk canceling the original intent. It's an Article 265 situation." Then, just like that, she turned and walked away, as if she'd merely commented on the weather. From his office upstairs, Damien had seen the whole thing. And then he did something he rarely did, something very personal. He opened a notebook he almost never used, and in the corner of a clean page, he quietly wrote her name, Lena Morales, not as a task, not as a formality, but as a reminder that sometimes brilliance shows up in faded sneakers, a secondhand backpack, and a mind sharper than most resumes. That night, almost 10 p.m., the office was quiet. Chicago's skyline glowed outside, tall and proud. But inside, everything felt still. Lena sat at Damien's desk, organizing the last few documents for the Renshaw case. The only light came from the desk lamp, casting a soft golden halo over papers, files, and the quiet determination in her face. He watched as she carefully folded a sheet of her handwritten notes. She always did it the same way, twice into perfect rectangles, almost like she was sealing a private letter instead of a legal analysis. "You don't have to stay this late," Damien finally said, breaking the long silence. "I know," she replied, gently placing the folded paper in the folder. "But I like the office when it's empty. It's easier to think. When no one's looking at me like I'm some kind of circus act." She put the last book into her bag, then pulled over a wooden chair, the plain one, not the elegant seat she used for formal meetings. It made her feel more grounded, more real. "Can I ask you something?" Damien asked, leaning slightly forward. "Sure," she said, flashing a tired grin. "But if it's about case law, I charge extra after 9 p.m. He chuckled softly, then grew serious. "Why did you study law? I mean, what made you choose it?" Lena paused, then took a breath like she was opening a drawer she hadn't touched in years. "My father," she began slowly, "was a construction worker. He died when I was 16, in an accident on site." Her eyes lowered to her hands. "The company tried not to pay any compensation. They claimed it was his fault, that he wasn't wearing the right safety gear. But it wasn't true. It was a lie." She paused again. The weight of memory in her voice was unmistakable. "My mom didn't know how to fight it. We couldn't afford a lawyer. And the few who agreed to meet with us acted like we were lucky just to be heard." Damien didn't say a word, just listened. "So I thought, maybe if I understood the law I could protect her, and others like her. I enrolled in college on a scholarship." "Did you win the case?" he asked gently. "We did," she nodded. "After 2 long years. My mom used the settlement to open a small dressmaking shop in our neighborhood. It's still there. She sews little party dresses for girls who want to feel like princesses." Lena smiled, bittersweet, proud. "You must have been an excellent student," Damien said. "I was," she replied. "Good grades. Study groups. I loved legal debates. I had a plan. Finish undergrad, go to grad school, and one day open a legal aid office where people like my mom wouldn't be turned away." There was a pause. "What happened?" he asked softly. The question floated in the quiet room. Lena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a habit Damien had noticed she did whenever gathering her thoughts. "Diego," she said. "I met him in my 2nd year. He was studying business. Confident. Charming. Big dreams. I thought we dreamed the same." Damien leaned forward, attentive. His breathing had slowed. "We dated for a year and a half. Then I found out I was pregnant. It was unexpected, but I thought we'd face it together." She looked out the window. "But he panicked, said he was too young, that he still had plans. Suggested I take care of it." Lena's voice dropped. "I told him I respected his choice not to be a father, but I was going to have the baby. I told him he didn't need to worry. I'd manage." "And did you?" Damien asked. "I had to," she said simply. "I dropped out midway through my 3rd year. My scholarship didn't cover daycare. My mom was busy running her shop. So, I started working." Damien felt something stir in his chest. Admiration? Frustration at the injustice of it all? Maybe both. "And Diego?" "He vanished. Moved to another city after graduation. I never saw him again." She paused, emotion held tightly behind her voice. "When Miguel was younger, he used to ask about his dad. But not anymore. I think he understands now. That we're a full family, just the 2 of us." Damien looked at her, trying to process the strength it had taken to sit here, across from him, and still be this composed. "And you never thought about going back to college?" he asked quietly. Lena gave a faint laugh. "I did. After opening up about the dreams she sacrificed for her son." Lena stood by the window, her story quietly echoing in Damien's mind. And what she said next only deepened the impression she had left on him. "I thought about going back to school every night," she said, still gazing out at the skyline. "After I'd put Miguel to bed, I'd open the books I managed to borrow, or buy secondhand at street fairs." She turned slightly, her voice steady. But then I realized something. I never stopped studying. I just changed how I did it. She walked slowly to the tall window, her reflection faint in the glass as the city shimmered behind her. I started going to the local library. It's small, but they have a decent legal section. And on Saturdays, Professor Marchese, the same one I mentioned to Alexander, used to give extra lessons there. When he heard my story, he started lending me books. Lending you? Damien asked, surprised. At first, yes, she nodded. But once he saw that I was serious, that I took notes, asked questions, really studied, he started giving me the books. He said, "Books are meant to be read, not just sit on shelves like trophies." Damien stepped beside her, both of them now silhouetted against the glowing city. "And you were never angry?" he asked. "About having to give up your plan?" Lena turned, and for the first time that evening, there was a sharper intensity in her eyes. "Oh, I was angry," she said. "Angry at Diego, at life, at myself, for trusting someone who wasn't ready for anything real. For a long time, I felt like everything I'd worked for had vanished." She paused, as if reaching back to a moment etched into her memory. "But when Miguel was born, when I held him in my arms for the first time, I realized something important. My plans hadn't been destroyed. They had just changed shape." Her voice softened. "I might not be the lawyer I dreamed of becoming at 18, but I became the mother I needed to be at 20. Damien's eyes didn't leave her. "And now, do you regret it?" he asked. "Having Miguel?" She smiled. "Never. He's the best part of me. He taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and still moving forward." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The glow from the desk lamp painted quiet shadows around them. Damien watched her, not as a CEO assessing a team member, but as a man deeply moved by the strength of a human spirit. "You still study every night?" he asked. "Every night," she nodded. "After he falls asleep, I open my books. I read cases, study legal precedents, follow new decisions. Not because I have to, but because it makes sense to me. Because it connects to something I still believe in." He leaned against the windowsill, arms crossed. "Even though you can't practice?" "Practicing law is one thing," she replied. "Understanding it is another. And who knows? Maybe someday I will go back. Miguel's growing up, becoming more independent. Maybe it'll finally be time to finish what I started." Something stirred in Damien. Not just admiration. It was deeper than that. A kind of quiet awe. She hadn't climbed by stepping over others. She had built herself stone by stone, in the dark, with no applause. "You're remarkable," he said, the words escaping with more emotion than he'd intended. Lena shook her head with a gentle smile. "I'm a single mom who scrubs floors and reads case law between chores. Nothing remarkable about that." "You're wrong," he said, his voice firmer now. "You took something that could have broken you and turned it into strength. You raised a son alone. You never stopped learning. You never lost your kindness or your sense of humor. And on top of that, you've solved problems none of my lawyers, with all their degrees, could figure out." Lena's smile trembled. There was a glassy shine in her eyes. "Miguel asked me the other day if I was sad about not becoming a lawyer," she said softly. "What did you tell him?" "I told him, maybe I didn't become the lawyer I dreamed of being, but I became the person I needed to be. And that's worth more." The silence that followed was rich, full of something that couldn't quite be named. Lena smoothed her hair, picked up her bag, and with that simple gesture, seemed to shift back into her employee self. But something between them had changed. A trust, a shared understanding. One that went beyond legal advice or office hierarchy. "I need to go," she said gently. "Miguel goes to bed early, but he likes me to be there when he wakes up in the middle of the night. Sometimes he has nightmares." "Of course," Damien said. "Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for listening." She walked to the door, then paused. "And Damien, this conversation stays between us." "Of course," he said quickly. "Not because it's a secret, but because it's personal." She nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Damien stood in silence, staring at the empty chair where she had been sitting. For the first time in years he felt small, but not in a defeated way, in a humble one, like he'd just met someone who redefined his understanding of resilience, character, and what it truly means to be strong. The next morning, Damien arrived at the office earlier than usual. Not for meetings, not for urgent documents, but because he wanted to observe, to understand a little more about the woman who had reshaped his entire perspective in the span of one conversation. He sat in the break room, positioned quietly where he could see the hallway. At exactly 8:15, Lena walked in. Same blue uniform, same old backpack. But to Damien, everything about her looked different now. Every step she took seemed filled with quiet intention. Every smile she offered her coworkers radiated something more than politeness. It was kindness. Lived in, earned, real. She stopped to help an intern who had dropped a pile of documents. But she didn't just help him scoop them up. She sorted them by date, then handed them back with a small joke. Be careful. Legal documents tend to have a life of their own. The intern laughed, visibly grateful. Later, during a legal team meeting, Damien found himself half distracted. Not by the agenda, but by a thought. What would Lena say about this clause? When a lawyer proposed a weak strategy, Damien almost whispered, Lena would spot the loophole in Clause 3. He held back. At lunchtime, he noticed her sitting in the courtyard alone, eating a sandwich and reading a book on constitutional law. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't putting on a show. It was genuine, quiet passion quietly pursued. Damien didn't know what he was feeling. It wasn't just admiration, not attraction in the usual sense. It was something more layered, curiosity, respect, a deep need to understand how such brilliance had bloomed in such hard soil. By the end of the day, after the office had begun to empty out, Damien asked her to stop by. I have something for you, he said, handing her an envelope. Lena opened it. Inside was a check, a significant amount enough to cover months of rent, food, and bills. What's this? She asked. A bonus, he said, for all the help you've given me, for the insights none of my legal staff could offer. Lena looked at the check, then quietly held it out and gave it back. After Lena quietly handed the check back, Damien was stunned. Why wouldn't she accept something she clearly earned? But what she said next only deepened his admiration for her. I can't accept this, she said gently. Why not? Damien asked, genuinely confused. You deserve it. The value you bring to my work is worth far more than this. Exactly, Lena replied calmly. That's why I can't take it. She sat in the same chair she had used the night before, the one that had become her informal seat in his office. She wasn't cold or dramatic, just resolute. If I accept that check, you'll feel like we're even. Like you've paid me for my knowledge, my help. And I'll feel like I was just compensated. Like I gave you something and got something in return. But isn't that exactly what I'm doing? Damien asked, still puzzled. Compensating someone who's been incredibly helpful? Lena shook her head, her voice steady but firm. No, Damien. I'm not a favor. I'm value. The words landed with quiet force. Measured, composed, but undeniably powerful. You don't understand, she continued. I'm not helping you because I need the money. I'm helping because I want to, because it finally feels like all the knowledge I've fought so hard to keep alive actually matters to someone. She paused, folding her hands in her lap. Taking money would turn this into a transaction. But what we have here, it's something else. A kind of partnership. Damien slowly put the check away, feeling something unfamiliar. Rejected, yes, but also impressed deeply and undeniably. Then tell me, he asked quietly, how can I give something back? Lena looked at him, the answer ready and simple. Keep letting me be involved. Keep trusting my judgment. And maybe, just maybe, see me as a person. Not just as a cleaning lady who happens to know some law. It was in that exact moment Damien realized what he had been feeling. He was falling in love. Not with Lena's appearance, or because she had been useful to him at work. But with her clarity, her strength, her values. Her ability to turn hardship into insight and silence into intelligence. And it terrified him more than any lawsuit he had ever faced. The next morning at Hayes and Lee began like any other on the surface. Lena arrived exactly at 8 a.m., greeted the security guard with her usual smile, and pushed her cleaning cart down the administrative hallway, just as she always did. What she didn't know was that, just a few feet away, Marcus Thompson, a second-year intern with an overactive TikTok account, was discreetly filming a new video for his followers. Marcus had been curious for days. Rumors had been circling around the office. Whispers of a mysterious, invisible consultant who had been helping Damian Hayes solve some of the firm's toughest cases. And this morning, he thought he might have found the source. He spotted Lena, leaning casually on a broom, explaining something to two younger interns. Not just chatting, teaching. The difference between a termination clause and a rescission clause? Lena said, gesturing with her hand. Think of it like a breakup. The interns leaned in, half amused, half intrigued. A termination clause, she said, is like ending things because you just can't agree on which movies to watch anymore. Nobody's at fault. It's just not working. She smiled. But rescission? That's when you find out one person was secretly eating all the popcorn and lying about it. That's a breach of trust. The interns burst into laughter. And what if someone lied about loving horror movies just to impress the other? One of them asked. That, Lena said, pointing, is misrepresentation. The entire agreement was based on false information. That voids the contract from the start. Like when you find out your crush doesn't even like dogs or pizza? Another intern added. Exactly, Lena said, laughing. That's a fundamental mismatch. Relationship voided. Marcus, still filming, was stunned. She explained in seconds what his professors couldn't make clear in hours. And how do we know which clause applies in a legal case? Asked one intern. Lena shrugged. Main question, was there bad faith? If yes, it's rescission. If not, it's termination. Like breaking up over text or in person. Either way, it's done. But one hurts a little more. As she turned to grab her rag, another intern piped up. What if both people want out, but for different reasons? Oh, Lena grinned. That's a mutual divorce with a fight over who keeps the dog. Bilateral termination with a division clause. Everyone takes back what they brought in. But someone's fighting for the Netflix password. Laughter erupted again. Marcus stopped recording with a final shot of Lena giving a relaxed wave. What happened next surprised even Marcus. Within 2 hours, the video had 50,000 views. By the 4-hour mark, it crossed 200,000. By the end of the day, it hit 500,000. Law students, attorneys, and even law professors flooded the comments. She explained in 2 minutes what my professor couldn't explain all semester. I'd drop out just to study with her. She's the reason law finally makes sense. Wait, she's the janitor? The video spread like wildfire. It reached WhatsApp study groups at law schools across the country. Twitter blew up with the hashtag #JanitorJD. Instagram was flooded with story reposts of Lena's metaphors about popcorn, Netflix, and fundamental mismatches. Legal blogs ran headlines. Cleaning staff teaches contract law, goes viral overnight. Legal news. The accidental educator who's changing how we talk about law, law for all. But the true explosion came when the meme account Legal Memes posted an image of Lena holding a broom, standing next to 11 lawyers in robes. The caption, "The janitor who outsmarted 11 doctors of law." That meme alone spawned dozens of spin-offs. When the janitor knows more than your overpriced lawyer. Plot twist. The smartest person in the office doesn't wear a suit. She cleans your floors and your legal arguments. The next morning, Lena arrived at work as usual, completely unaware, until she saw the receptionist grinning ear to ear, practically vibrating with excitement. "Lena, you've gone viral." "What?" Lena said, confused. The receptionist showed her the video. Over 2 million views. Lena watched it in amused disbelief, then shook her head with a half-smile. "That Marcus. I always thought he recorded too much. You're not mad. Why would I be? Did I say anything wrong? No. But he didn't ask for permission. That's true. But I didn't share anything confidential. And judging by the comments, people are actually learning. At 10 a.m., Damien arrived at the office, only to find chaos waiting at his desk. 3 voicemail messages from journalists. 2 emails from TV producers requesting interviews with the viral janitor. A message from HR asking how the firm should handle the sudden media attention. Damien called Marcus into his office immediately. You had no right to film an employee without their consent. Mr. Hayes, Marcus stammered. I didn't know it would go viral. It was just a silly video. For my followers. Take it down. Now. Sir. Even if I delete it, it's been shared thousands of times. It won't make much difference. And technically, I filmed it in a public part of the office. She didn't say she didn't want to be recorded. Damien took a slow breath, trying to calm the heat rising in his chest. He wasn't angry at Lena. He was worried. Worried about what this might mean for the firm, questions about hiring practices, the embarrassment of realizing a janitor had outshone their top legal staff, and the uncomfortable spotlight it might shine on everything they didn't know about her. After the viral video threw Lena into the spotlight, Damien knew a conversation was inevitable, and it wasn't going to be easy. He called her into his office that morning, the tension lingering in the air like a fog neither of them wanted to breathe in. Lena, he began carefully, we need to talk about this situation. She sat across from him, calm as ever. The video? I saw it. Honestly, it's kind of funny. Damien leaned forward, clasping his hands. Do you understand the implications? The press might want to talk to you. They'll dig into your past. Ask why you're not practicing law. They might twist things. Lena didn't even blink. And I'll tell them the truth. I studied law. I didn't finish because of personal reasons. But I never stopped learning, because I love it. What's the problem? Damien hesitated. The problem is, this could create an awkward situation for the firm. People will question our competence. They'll ask why we're relying on a cleaning staff member to help with major legal cases. Lena crossed her arms. Her tone shifted calm, but serious. Are you embarrassed by me? That question hit him like a punch to the chest. No, that's not it. Then what is it? She pressed gently. Did I break any rules? Share confidential information? Disrespect a client? Damien shook his head. No, of course not. Then let me ask you this, she said, her voice steady and razor-sharp. Would you rather have a team that pretends to know everything, or someone who actually understands the law, no matter what job title they happen to have? The room went quiet. Damien sighed. You're right. I'm sorry. This kind of attention complicates our partnership. Our partnership, she said with a soft smile, has always been complicated, Damien, since day one, and it still worked. She stood and walked over to the window, gazing out at the Chicago skyline. You want to know what I think about that video? If people laugh at me, that's fine, as long as they learn something while they're at it. She turned to face him. How many law students do you think finally understood those legal concepts because I compared them to breakups and Netflix accounts? He thought for a moment. Probably a lot. Exactly, she said. Then the video served a purpose. And if it causes some discomfort for the firm, we'll deal with it. But I'm not going to shrink back just because people found out that intelligence doesn't always come with a diploma. Damien looked at her, once again struck by her clarity, her poise. You're not afraid of being judged? She laughed softly. Damien, I'm a single mother, cleaner, a woman who studies case law during her breaks. If I was afraid of being judged, I wouldn't even leave the house. She paused, then asked simply, what matters more? Am I doing something useful? Am I helping someone? Am I being true to myself? And are you? He asked, already knowing the answer. I am, she said firmly. So let the memes come, the interviews, the questions. I'll answer everything the same way I explain contracts. Clearly, simply, honestly. That afternoon, when 3 more news outlets reached out asking for interviews with the viral janitor, Damien didn't try to stop them. He just asked Lena, "Do you need anything from me?" She smiled. "Just promise me one thing. Anything. If a journalist asks you about your cleaner," she said softly, "tell them he's the smartest boss I know, because it's true, and because intelligence recognizes intelligence." And in that moment it was official. Damien Hayes was completely in love. But there was little time to dwell on that feeling. The highly anticipated trial, Renshaw versus Hayes and Lee, was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. in the Chicago Superior Court. It was the kind of case that could make or break a firm. $60 million was on the line. So was the reputation Damien had built across 15 years of relentless work. By Friday, the office was crackling with tension. Lawyers scrambled through documents, reviewed arguments, and exchanged stiff nods in the hallway. The pressure was crushing. The firm's defense strategy hinged on the interpretation of a single clause, Clause 38B. It was complex, controversial, and the very same clause Lena had flagged as weak. Weeks ago, inside his office, Damien sat surrounded by 3 senior attorneys, each looking more stressed than the last. "The structure of our argument is solid," said Robert Chen, the firm's most experienced litigator. "But the prosecution is going to hammer us on our reading of the safeguard clause." "And what if they cite Morrison versus Atlantic?" asked Sarah, his sharp and capable second-in-command. "That precedent punches holes straight through our interpretation." Damien rubbed his temples, exhausted. He'd gone over every detail, every angle, but something still didn't sit right. Something was missing. That's when there was a knock on the door. "Excuse me," Lena said gently, peeking in. "Can I come in?" "Of course." She stepped in, balancing a tray of coffee in one hand and a folder under her arm. "I brought caffeine, and maybe a few thoughts." Robert raised an eyebrow as she placed the tray down. "You're worried about Morrison versus Atlantic?" "You should be," she said, flipping open the folder. "But for a different reason." The room went silent. "That precedent?" Lena said calmly. "It was partially overturned 6 months ago in Hamilton versus Shore Industries." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's not in any of our materials." "It wouldn't be," Lena replied. "It was published in a lesser-known legal journal. Most firms don't track those. But it completely changes the precedent's weight in court." "And what should we be watching out for?" Damien asked, sitting up straighter. "Nelson versus Phoenix Corp. 2 months ago," she said, pulling out another document. "The judge in that case redefined how ambiguous clauses in merger contracts are interpreted. If the prosecution brings it up, yes, it's risky. But there's a counterweight." She pulled up a chair and spread more papers on the table. "Fitzgerald versus Morgan Steele, 1987. That ruling supports our approach almost perfectly, using historical intent as the guiding principle." Over the next 2 hours, Lena rewrote the playbook. She didn't just critique the existing defense strategy. She rebuilt it from the ground up. Precedents, language, logic. The senior attorneys sat there, amazed, watching a woman with no official title lead them into battle with nothing but clarity, precision, and undeniable command of the law. "You should be the one in court Monday," Robert said, half joking, half serious. "I can't. And I won't," Lena said softly. "Why not?" "Because that's not where I belong. Here is where I belong. Helping you prepare. Supporting the team. Damien's going to shine in that courtroom. And you'll all see why he's one of the best attorneys in Chicago." That Sunday night, Damien called her. "I'm nervous," he confessed. "Nervous or insecure?" she asked gently. "What's the difference? Nervous means you're ready, but your heart's still racing. Insecure means you're not sure you can do it." He smiled. "Then I'm nervous." "Good," Lena said. "That means you care." They spent 40 minutes reviewing arguments. She drilled him with potential questions, rehearsed rebuttals, repeated the key rulings. When they finally hung up, Damien felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Prepared. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, law students, curious spectators, all drawn in by the mysterious janitor, who had shaken up Chicago's legal world. Lena sat quietly in the back row, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, blending in. But Damien knew exactly where she was. And as he stood to give his opening remarks, he felt her presence. Solid, steady, like a lighthouse behind the storm. He began. His delivery was clear, persuasive, focused. He cited the precedents Lena had unearthed, laid out a logic that was airtight. For 40 minutes, he commanded the courtroom. But then the prosecution struck back. "Your Honor," said the opposing counsel, a sharply dressed woman in her 50s. "The defense relies on a questionable precedent that has been." Just when it seemed the courtroom was under Damien's control, the prosecution threw a curveball. With confident poise, the prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "the defense's interpretation of Fitzgerald versus Morgenstern is flawed. I'd like to point out that this precedent was partially modified by the more recent ruling in Torres versus Infinity Holdings." The words hit Damien like a punch to the chest. Torres versus Infinity Holdings? The name echoed in his mind, hollow and unfamiliar. He hadn't studied it. Lena hadn't mentioned it. No one on his team had flagged it. And now it was front and center in the courtroom. The prosecutor continued, unfazed. The decision in Torres versus Infinity clearly established that in merger contracts involving ambiguous clauses, the interpretation must favor the party that did not draft the original agreement. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. The energy in the courtroom shifted. Damien's heart pounded. His mouth felt dry. This wasn't in the briefings. His team looked at him with panicked eyes, waiting for a response he didn't have. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said, turning toward him, "would you like to respond to the precedent raised by the prosecution?" Damien stood slowly, rifling through his notes. Pages flipped. Nothing. His mind was a blank slate. Then, a quiet voice from the back of the courtroom reached him like a lifeline through the fog. Article 127, Paragraph 3. Partial, not full modification. Lena. She had stood, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. Those few words were enough to ground him. He took a breath, then stepped forward with renewed clarity. "Your Honor," Damien began, his voice steady. "With all due respect, Torres versus Infinity Holdings introduced only a partial modification to Fitzgerald versus Morgenstern, not a full repeal." He walked slowly through the courtroom, confidence rebuilding with every word. Article 127, Paragraph 3 explicitly states that partial changes to legal precedents must only apply to the specific issues addressed in the newer ruling. He paused, catching the judge's full attention. In Torres versus Infinity, the core issue revolved around hostile takeovers, cases where one party acted in bad faith or withheld critical information. That is not the context of our case. The prosecutor's expression faltered. She hadn't expected that level of precision. Damien continued, emboldened now. Furthermore, the judge in Torres made it very clear that the ruling should not be applied broadly. It was tailored to situations involving coercion or a significant imbalance of information. He turned, facing the judge directly. "This case, our case, is about a friendly merger, conducted in good faith over 8 months of transparent negotiations. Both parties had full access to all documentation. Therefore, Torres versus Infinity is not applicable here." He closed his argument with a firm nod. The original interpretation from Fitzgerald versus Morgenstern remains not only valid but perfectly aligned with the nature of this contract. Silence. Only the soft tapping of the judge's pen broke the stillness. Finally, the judge spoke. "Mr. Hayes, your argument is both consistent and well supported. The objection is overruled." 2 hours later, the case was won. Unanimously, Clause 38B stood firm. The contract remained valid. Hayes and Lee kept the $60 million and their reputation. Back at the office, the mood was euphoric. Laughter, clinking glasses, and toasts echoed in every corner. But Damien wasn't interested in celebration just yet. He needed to find one person. He walked straight to his office where Lena was reviewing files. "I need to talk to you," he said, closing the door behind him. She turned, calm as ever. How did you know about Torres versus Infinity? I looked it up last night, she replied. After you called and said you were nervous, I figured I'd double-check for any recent rulings that might interfere with our argument. You found 3 cases, didn't you? She nodded. Yes, including that one. Then, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you were already under pressure, Lena said gently. I knew if it came up, you'd rise to the moment. You just needed the right words at the right time. Damien sat down, eyes full of gratitude. Lena, you saved my career today. She shook her head. You saved your own career. I just whispered a line. No, it was more than that. It's always been more than that. You've been helping me since the beginning. And now, he stood. I want to make this official. Lena looked up, surprised. I want you to be my personal assistant and lead legal advisor. Full salary, full benefits, and all the recognition you've earned. Her eyes welled up. Are you serious? Completely. This isn't charity. This is respect. For your mind. For your value. I accept. They hugged. It was meant to be professional, but it lingered longer than either expected. That evening, Damien hosted a celebration dinner at Rosewood, one of Chicago's finest restaurants. The entire legal team came. Several high-profile clients attended as well. And when Lena walked in, Damien almost didn't recognize her. She wore a simple navy blue dress, elegant but unpretentious. Her hair, usually tied up, now framed her face gently. She was radiant. Not because of the dress or makeup, but because of her quiet confidence. She moved through the room with ease, discussing legal concepts with clarity, making the guests laugh with her signature metaphors about contracts and relationships. Damien couldn't take his eyes off her. The way she listened, the way she responded with equal grace to both partners and waiters. It wasn't about status or approval. Lena simply was. And that authenticity made her unforgettable. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Damien offered to drive her home. You don't have to, she said. I insist, he smiled. It's the least I can do. In the car, the conversation was light, about the case, her new role, a few lingering points they hadn't covered in the office. But when they pulled up to her building, the air changed. Damien turned off the engine. Lena, she looked at him. Silence filled the space between them, electric, unspoken. And then he leaned in. Their kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper, more certain. Her hand touched his face. His breath caught. But as they pulled apart, the moment shattered. That was a mistake, Damien said, suddenly tense. What? Lena's voice was barely audible. It shouldn't have happened. You work for me now. This complicates things. It was inappropriate. Her expression shifted. Not angry, but quietly hurt. I see, she said softly. Then I think it's best if you forget it happened. Please. She got out of the car without another word. Damien sat there, alone, watching her disappear into the building, realizing he just made the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, he arrived at the office 2 hours earlier than usual. He hadn't slept. The kiss played on loop in his mind. But more than that, it was her face. That look of disappointment, of quiet retreat. It haunted him. At 9 a.m., Lena arrived. On her new desk, no longer tucked away in the back closet, but a real desk on the administrative floor, sat an elegant bouquet of white roses. The card read, I apologize for my inappropriate behavior yesterday. D.H. Lena stared at the flowers, then picked them up and walked to Damien's office. He ended his phone call the moment she stepped in. Lena, they're beautiful, she interrupted, setting the bouquet on his desk. But I'm allergic. Allergic? To roses. No, she met his eyes. Allergic to expensive, scented apologies. She left a folded note beside the vase and walked out without another word. Damien opened the note slowly. It read, Next time you want to apologize, try talking. Flowers die in a week. Honest words last forever. Over the next few days, Damien tried again. More gently, more thoughtfully. a cup of her favorite coffee from a small cafe near her home, a quiet offer to help with her legal library. Each time, Lena accepted with professionalism, but kept her distance. Her tone remained kind, but firm. The emotional boundary was clear. She wasn't punishing him. She was protecting herself. On Wednesday, during a strategy meeting for a new case, Damien took a different approach. He turned to the group and said, "Let's hear from our new advisor. Lena has a valuable perspective here." All eyes turned to her. Lena didn't flinch. She responded with poise, offered sharp insights, and resolved a deadlock that had stalled the discussion for days. Despite her professionalism in the meeting, Lena couldn't leave things unsaid. The moment the other lawyers left, still praising her for her sharp insights, she turned to Damien with a quiet firmness. "Don't use my work," she said, "to try to fix what broke outside of it." Damien's eyes widened. "That's not what It is, and you don't have to." Her tone was calm, but resolute. "My work has always spoken for itself. I don't need you to validate me professionally just because you messed up personally." He fell silent, caught between respect and regret. On Thursday morning, he tried again, but this time with something more subtle. He left a newly released book on her desk, New Precedents in Contract Law. The collection had just come out the week before, and he knew, without a doubt, it was exactly the kind of reading she'd love. Lena flipped through it during her break, clearly intrigued by the cases and commentary. But by the end of the day, she returned the book with a small sticky note attached. "Thanks for the loan. I've already ordered my own copy. Message received." Friday brought yet another attempt. As they worked side by side reviewing a new case, Damien casually tried to open up a more personal conversation. Just something small, a bridge. But Lena gently held up her hand. "Damien, can we set some rules?" "Of course," he replied. She looked him straight in the eyes. 1. My work is excellent because I love what I do, not because you need me. 2. Our professional partnership is solid, and it's going to stay that way. 3. What happened in the parking lot stays there. And 4. Stop trying to make up for what you said with coffee, flowers, books, or gestures. If you really believed it was a mistake, then it was. That's it. Let's move on. Damien gave a small nod, the words sinking in deeper than he expected. But in his eyes, there was something unspoken, something Lena chose not to analyze. Not yet. That weekend, while Miguel played with his toy cars in the living room, he glanced out the window and spotted something familiar. "Mom!" he called out. "The flower man is back." Lena looked up from the kitchen. "The flower man?" Miguel nodded. "The one who brought the white flowers you gave back. The same guy who dropped you off after the fancy dinner." Lena walked to the window. There he was, Damien, standing next to his car, staring up at her building, clearly unsure whether to come up or drive away. She crouched beside Miguel. "Hey, champ, is he your friend or your boyfriend?" the boy asked with childlike curiosity. Lena smiled and gently brushed his hair. "Why do you want to know?" "Because Grandma says if someone's your friend, they should be invited up." "But if he's your boyfriend?" "If he's my boyfriend, what then?" Miguel paused, deep in thought. "Then you have to decide if you really like him, or if he's just confused. Because a confused boyfriend makes you sad. And I don't like it when you're sad." Lena blinked, startled by the quiet wisdom of her 6-year-old. She hugged him tightly, her heart both heavy and light at the same time. "And what do you think he is?" she whispered. Miguel squinted out the window. "I think he's a friend who wanted to be a boyfriend, but got scared. Like Pedro in my class. He likes Sophia, but pretends he doesn't, 'cause the other boys would laugh." Lena chuckled softly. "You're very smart, you know that?" Miguel beamed. "Grandma always says that. She also says, grown-ups can be sillier than kids sometimes." Lena laughed out loud this time, still watching Damien from above. He hadn't moved, just standing there like a man caught in limbo between courage and regret. "You know what?" she murmured. "Your grandma's absolutely right." Damien eventually got back into his car and drove off. But the moment stayed. And as she returned to the kitchen, Lena found herself lost in thought. Not just about Damien, but about the tangled feelings she hadn't fully named. In the background, Miguel resumed his play, but then called out again, "Mom? If he comes back tomorrow, can I talk to him?" "Why?" she asked. "Because sometimes grown-ups who are confused need help from kids." She shook her head, smiling. He wasn't wrong. Adults do make simple things far too complicated. The following Monday, Damien did something unexpected. He showed up at Lena's desk, not with flowers, not with coffee, not with grand apologies, but with a simple invitation. "Want to have lunch outside?" he asked. "I need to talk to you about a case, but away from the office." Lena looked up, instantly sensing something different in him. He wasn't pushing. He wasn't rehearsed. He looked real, less polished, more human. "What kind of case?" she asked carefully. "The kind that can't be solved with case law." They went to a little cafe downtown. Not the kind of sleek, high-end spot Damien usually favored. This place had old wooden tables, a chalkboard menu, and a cozy worn-in charm. Lena immediately felt at ease. Damien, however, barely touched his sandwich. He fiddled with his napkin, clearly wrestling with something. After a few minutes of silence, she finally asked, "Okay, what kind of case has you this unsettled?" He looked up, as if preparing for a confession. "I'm the case," he said simply. Lena didn't speak. She just waited. "I don't know how to handle what I'm feeling," Damien admitted. "Ever since you walked into my life, everything changed. The way I think, the way I work, the way I see things, even the way I exist." "And that scares you?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Because I've never felt this before. I've never admired someone this much. Never wanted to be near someone. Just to hear their thoughts, to learn how they see the world." Lena set her fork down. She wasn't smiling. "Are you confused because you fell in love?" she asked softly. "Or are you confused because you fell in love with me?" The question caught him off guard. He looked stunned. "What's the difference?" She leaned forward, eyes steady. "The difference is, maybe you're not used to women who don't need you. Not your money, not your title, not your power. Just you." Damien frowned, digesting her words. "What do you mean?" "The women you've known," Lena said, "needed what you could give them. I don't. And that leaves you with no reference point, doesn't it?" He went quiet for a long moment. "Maybe you're right," he whispered. "It's not maybe, Damien. You've spent your whole life being needed by people, for the wrong reasons. With me, you're not the CEO, not the wealthy guy. You're just the man who asks thoughtful questions, and who still laughs at my terrible jokes." "Your jokes aren't terrible." "Yes, they are." She laughed lightly. "But you laugh anyway." He smiled. For the first time in days, something between them softened. "So that's it," Damien said, his voice low. "I'm confused." After their honest conversation over lunch, something between Damien and Lena had shifted, but not in the way either of them had hoped. "You make me feel both unnecessary and essential at the same time," Damien had confessed, his voice unsure. "Exactly," Lena replied gently. "You don't have to be anything but yourself. And that terrifies you." He didn't argue. Instead, he simply nodded, finally facing the clarity she offered. "And that kiss?" he started, pausing as if the words weighed too much. "I really believe it was inappropriate. You work for me now, and I never want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable." Lena tilted her head, studying him with steady eyes. "Then maybe," she said calmly, "you should think a little more before going around kissing people." His mouth opened, but she kept going. "Or did you kiss me out of admiration?" "No," he said firmly. "I kissed you because, in that moment, I couldn't imagine anything more right in the world. And after that, fear took over. Fear of making things complicated, of losing you as a colleague, of, I don't know, not being enough." Lena leaned back, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Damien, you're many things. Smart, dedicated, sometimes as stubborn as a mule. But not enough? Never. He looked at her, almost hopeful. Then why do I feel like I am? Because, she said, you're learning how to be with someone who doesn't want anything from you, except your company. That is scary, isn't it? They finished the rest of their lunch with quiet ease, their conversation shifting to work. But something had undoubtedly changed. A new honesty now colored the space between them, an honesty that brought both clarity and complication. Back at the office, as they reached her desk, Damien hesitated before asking, Lena, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you feel anything for me? She paused, searching his face. I'm sorry, but I'm confused too. And unlike you, I don't have the luxury of kissing someone and calling it a mistake afterward. When you figure out what you really want, let me know. Until then, we're colleagues. Good colleagues. That night, back home, Lena was quiet. Miguel was already asleep, and she was folding laundry with her mother, Carmen, in the living room. Carmen glanced at her daughter, sensing the weight in her silence. You seem different, she said. Different how? Sad. Not the kind that makes you cry. The kind that comes from thinking too much. Lena gave a tired smile. Her mother always saw right through her. I'm okay, Mom. Just working through changes. What kind of changes? Work, personal stuff, a bit of everything. Carmen stopped folding and sat down beside her. Talk to me. Work is great, Lena began. Better than I ever imagined. I got the position I've always wanted. I'm doing what I love, and I'm finally being paid fairly. But my boss is complicated. How so? Lena let out a deep sigh. He's smart. He respects me. He values my work. And I think I feel something for him. And I think he does too. But he keeps second-guessing everything. He called his own feelings a mistake. Carmen nodded slowly, as if things were clicking into place. He's one of those men. The kind who don't know how to handle a strong woman. That's not it. He admires my strength, Lena replied. The problem is, I think it makes him insecure. And you? How do you feel? I'm confused. Care about him. But I don't know if he wants me, or if he just admires what I do. And I'm not sure I want to open my heart to someone who doesn't even understand his own. Carmen pulled her daughter close in a warm hug. Sweetheart, sometimes men take longer to figure out their hearts. Not because they're stupid, but because they've been taught that feelings are weakness. So what should I do? You keep being yourself, Carmen said. If he's smart, he'll realize he's found something rare. And if he doesn't, that's his loss. You've already proven you don't need anyone to be happy. Lena nodded, a little smile returning to her lips. Thanks, Mom. You're welcome. And Lena, yeah, even if you're feeling unsure, you're glowing. That always means something. That night, Lena drifted to sleep, still holding her mother's words close. In the days that followed, Damien did exactly what Lena expected him to do. He pulled away. He became the cool, composed CEO once more. He addressed her as Ms. Morales in meetings. He nodded politely in the hallways but didn't stop to talk. It was as if their honest lunch had left him exposed. So he retreated back behind the armor he had worn for most of his life. Lena noticed immediately, and responded the only way she knew how, with dignity. If he wanted distance, she gave him space. If he chose formality, she matched it. But she also stopped going the extra mile. No more off-the-record insights, no more lighthearted jokes in legal memos. When Damien left contracts on her desk with post-its asking for her opinion, she sent a response by email. Perfectly structured, technically sound, but with none of the warmth or personality he'd come to rely on. In one team meeting, Sarah whispered to Robert, "Have you noticed? Something's off between them. They used to have this rhythm." Even Marcus, still basking in pride for discovering Lena's brilliance, picked up on the shift. She no longer joked when explaining legal concepts. Her delivery was sharp, efficient, distant. Then, on Thursday, Damien was reviewing a dense contract and needed her input on a complicated clause. But instead of walking over, he typed up a formal email. Her response came 15 minutes later, 3 flawless paragraphs. Clinical, impersonal. The spark was gone. That night, at home alone, Damien did something he hadn't done before. He looked Lena up on social media. Her profile was simple, modest, really. Just a few photos, but each one spoke volumes. A video of Miguel attempting to pronounce jurisprudence while Lena laughed off camera. A photo of her explaining a health insurance contract to an elderly neighbor using cake-baking metaphors. Another one, quiet, intimate, showed her sitting in a library, surrounded by old law books, with Miguel fast asleep in her lap. It was a world unlike his own. No corner offices, no tailored suits, just real people, sharing knowledge, giving dignity, living honestly. And for the first time in weeks, Damien felt lost. On Saturday morning, with no real plan, Damien drove to Lena's neighborhood. Something in him just needed to understand. Understand her world, her rhythm, her choices. He stopped in front of a small building marked Hope Community Center. Through the large window, he spotted Lena, seated at a round table with a group of women and teenagers, animatedly discussing something. She had her sleeves rolled up, legal pamphlets spread out, and a gentle smile as she explained something to a worried-looking young mother. And in that moment, Damien Hayes had never felt more out of place, or more in awe. But he was about to learn that to truly step into someone else's world, you have to be ready to leave your own behind. After weeks of emotional confusion and professional distance, Damien made an unexpected decision: to walk into Lena's world, not just stand outside of it. He had driven across the city with no clear plan, only a need to understand. And now, standing in the doorway of the Hope Community Center, he saw her, at a round table, surrounded by people. Lena was speaking with ease, gesturing animatedly as others scribbled notes, completely at home. There was something about her posture here that he had never seen back at the firm. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove herself. She simply was. And in that naturalness, there was power. Taking a deep breath, Damien stepped inside. The conversation paused as everyone turned toward the unexpected guest. Lena looked up, clearly surprised. "Damien? What are you doing here?" "I was driving by and saw you," he said. "A lie." And they both knew it. "This," Lena told the group, "is Damien Hayes, my boss." "Oh," said one of the older women with a teasing smile. "The boss from the viral legal video?" "I'm Mrs. Rosa," she added, shaking his hand. "Lena was just explaining rental contracts to us." Damien returned the greeting politely, but his focus remained fixed on Lena. Can I talk to you for a moment?" They stepped to the far corner of the room, just out of earshot. "Seriously?" Lena said, her voice calm, not cold. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "How you do this. How you are. You all the time." Lena studied him. "You drove 40 minutes just to ask me that?" "Maybe." "Why?" He looked around at the group that had resumed their discussions, then back at her. "Because this week I went back to being the version of me I've always been. And I realized I don't like that person anymore." Lena crossed her arms, half expecting this. "And what exactly do you expect me to do about that? Will you let me learn from you?" he asked. And despite his polished suit and practiced confidence, the question came out soft, vulnerable. She was quiet for a long beat, then finally smiled for the first time in days. "That depends," she said. "Are you willing to listen to Mrs. Rosa explain why her lease is unfair, even if it takes 2 hours?" "I am." "And to help Mr. Carlos understand why his auto shop can't charge him for work he never approved?" "I am." "And to do it without feeling superior to anyone here?" Damien looked around again. For the first time, he didn't see the needy or the underrepresented. He saw strength, resourcefulness, stories that had gone unheard for far too long. "I'm willing to try," he said honestly. Lena nodded. "Then have a seat." Mrs. Rosa was just telling us how she figured out she was owed compensation. Compensation no lawyer even wanted to calculate for her. And so Damien sat down, For the first time in years, he didn't speak to impress. He didn't offer solutions. He simply listened. Over the next 2 hours, he heard stories that challenged his assumptions, about justice, about intelligence, about the true meaning of dignity. He left that room not with answers, but with new questions that echoed louder than any courtroom argument. Outside, as they walked together, Lena asked, "So, did you learn anything?" "I did," he said. "I learned that you're not just intelligent, you're wise. And there's a big difference." "What's the difference?" "Intelligence solves problems," Damien replied. "Wisdom changes people." They both smiled, and this time it was real. No barriers, no roles, just two people seeing each other clearly. The following Wednesday, Lena mentioned offhandedly that she'd be giving a talk at the community center. It was part of a long-running project, something she'd been building for 2 years. Free legal education for people who couldn't afford a lawyer. "Can I come?" Damien asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Won't you find it boring?" "On the contrary," he said, surprising even himself. "I think I need to see what real advocacy looks like." That Saturday afternoon, the small auditorium at the community center was packed. More than 40 people had squeezed into the rows of plastic chairs. Young mothers bouncing babies on their laps, retired men with notepads in hand, teens in hoodies leaning in with interest. Damien took a seat in the back. When Lena stepped onto the makeshift stage, she didn't wear a tailored suit or high heels. Just jeans, a soft blouse, and her hair worn loose. There was no pretense, only presence. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice bright and warm. "Today, we're going to talk about something we all need to understand. How not to get tricked when you buy something." Laughter rippled across the room. "But first," she said, "let's agree on something. Everyone in this room has been tricked at least once. I have. You have. Even that well-dressed gentleman in the back," she gestured casually toward Damien, "has probably been tricked." More laughter followed. Damien smiled. He didn't feel exposed, he felt welcomed. "The difference is," Lena continued, "when that happens to someone with money, they hire a lawyer. When it happens to people like us, we get mad, tell our friends, and then, that's it. We just accept the loss." An older woman raised her hand. "But Lena, lawyers are expensive. What are we supposed to do?" "Mrs. Maria, that's exactly what I'm here to talk about today," she replied. "You don't need a lawyer for everything. What you do need is to know your rights." Over the next hour, Lena broke down complex legal concepts using stories everyone understood. She explained warranties by comparing them to failed relationships. She illustrated abusive interest rates using examples of lending between friends. She described misleading contracts with metaphors about cake recipes that hide key ingredients. Damien was amazed, not just by her clarity, but by her gift for connection. She wasn't simplifying the law to dumb it down. She was lifting it up to meet people where they stood. More importantly, they didn't see her as someone swooping in to save them. They saw her as one of them, as an ally. When a young man asked how to dispute an unfair charge, Lena didn't just tell him what to do. She grabbed a marker and wrote a sample letter on the board, explaining tone, structure, and strategy. "Education," she said near the end, "is the one kind of power no one can take from you." Damien sat in the back, silent but moved. This was what real advocacy looked like. And it made him realize, to truly stand beside Lena, he would have to step far beyond his comfort zone. After witnessing Lena's raw brilliance at the community center and receiving a warm welcome from her mother and son, Damien couldn't deny it anymore. Something inside him had shifted. He had spent years chasing power, perfection, and prestige. But sitting at Carmen's dinner table, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and the smell of fresh lasagna, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. And maybe, just maybe, belonging. In the following weeks, their working relationship blossomed again. This time with an undercurrent of quiet honesty. The awkward tension from before faded, replaced by a new rhythm. Conversations were smoother. Silences were comfortable. But more importantly, Damien had started showing up, Not just at meetings or late-night strategy calls, but at the community center, regularly, not as a guest but as a volunteer. He discovered a surprising joy in teaching neighborhood entrepreneurs the basics of business contracts. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't headline-worthy, but it was real and deeply fulfilling. Lena saw this change, and though she didn't say it aloud, she felt something bloom inside her, something she had been afraid to name before: love. The annual Hazen Lee Gala was approaching, an elegant tradition where the firm's most powerful clients, partners, and employees gathered to celebrate the year's victories. Damien always delivered the main speech, a polished recap of legal milestones and growth charts. But this year he had something else in mind. That morning, he knocked on Lena's office door. "I need you to be there tonight," he said. "I always help organize the events," she replied. "Of course I'll be there." "No," he said gently. "I need you there as you, not as an employee." She blinked. "What are you planning?" "Something," he said with a small, nervous smile, "that I should have done a long time ago." That evening, the firm's main hall had been transformed. Golden lights hung from the rafters. Soft jazz floated through the air. Around 200 guests sipped champagne, exchanged pleasantries, and marveled at the firm's latest expansion. Lena arrived in a simple yet elegant black dress, a quiet statement of grace and confidence. She carried a small clutch and a hesitant smile. Miguel was home with Carmen, after making Lena promise she'd tell him everything about the party. "You look beautiful," Damien said as she stepped into the room, and for the first time, Lena didn't take it as a polite formality. She smiled. "You look very sharp too." He did. Black tux, perfectly groomed. But there was a softness to him tonight, something unguarded. As the cocktail hour unfolded, Lena mingled easily. Some clients recognized her as the cleaning lady from that viral video. She laughed with them, joked, and answered with poise. Every interaction she touched became genuine. From a distance, Damien watched her, the way she connected with people without effort, without agenda. Sarah, the firm's second-in-command, approached Lena during a quiet moment. "Can I be honest?" Sarah said. "When I first heard Damien had promoted you, I assumed it was a PR move. After the video." Lena nodded. "You weren't the only one. But now, I get it. I see why he says you're the smartest person here. And I see why he's different." "Different how?" "Happier. More open. More himself." Sarah gave her a warm smile. "He's been different since you." When it was time for the speech, Damien walked up to the small stage. He gently tapped his glass for attention. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you for joining us tonight." The room quieted, expecting the usual recap of profits and performance metrics. "Every year," he continued, "I stand here and talk about our success, the cases we've won, the revenue we've generated, the growth we've seen. And every year, you all politely listen as I list statistics." Soft chuckles rippled through the room. "But this year is different, because I've changed." He scanned the crowd until his eyes found Lena, standing near the wall, holding a wine glass she hadn't touched. "This year, I realized something. Intelligence isn't about degrees. Leadership isn't about titles. And value isn't measured in dollars." Murmurs passed through the room. Curiosity bloomed. "Yes," he said. "We've had our best year yet. 68 cases won, 200 million in contracts secured, 3 new offices opened. And yet, none of that matters as much as what I learned outside this building." He paused. "I learned that real law isn't practiced only in boardrooms. It lives in community centers, in neighborhood halls, in living rooms where people are trying to understand their rights." The room had gone completely silent. "I learned that knowledge is only powerful when it's shared, that intelligence only means something when it uplifts others, and that the most meaningful legal victory isn't a multimillion-dollar deal. It's helping a 70-year-old woman realize she doesn't have to pay for a service she never agreed to." He stepped down from the stage. As he walked through the crowd, people moved aside without a word. He stopped in front of Lena. "Because this year," he said softly. I met someone who taught me that intelligence doesn't wear a suit. After Damien's powerful speech and public proposal at the gala, no one in the room was left untouched, including Lena. His words had stripped away every remaining doubt. And when he looked into her eyes and offered not just a promotion, but a future, she knew this moment was real. Standing before the stunned but smiling crowd, Damien took a deep breath. Love, he said, can't be bought, bargained, or controlled. Love is recognized, respected, and built, one day at a time. He paused, then turned fully toward Lena, his voice unwavering. That's why, in front of all of you, I have two proposals to make. A hush fell over the room. First, he said, Lena, will you be my official partner? Not just an advisor, a full partner at Hazen Lee, with profit shares, voting rights, and a leadership role in the social justice projects we're launching. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Lena blinked, visibly moved. She nodded slowly, lips trembling with emotion. Then Damien continued. And second, and this one's even more important, he took one small step closer. Will you be my wife? This time the silence cracked. Audible gasps, sighs, even a few soft "oh my God"s echoed through the room. All eyes were on Lena. She glanced around at the expectant, beaming faces, then looked back at Damien. Are you sure? She whispered. Because there's no going back from this. I'm more certain about this than I've ever been about any contract, he said. Lena smiled, tears now spilling freely. Then I accept both proposals. But then she raised a playful eyebrow. On one condition. Name it. No expensive flower deliveries to try and impress me, she teased. If you want to give me something special, I want a library. A real one. With comfy chairs and a spot for Miguel to do his homework. Damien laughed and took her hands. Deal. A library, chairs, and anything else you want. He kissed her. And this time it wasn't awkward or unclear. It was the right kiss at the right time in front of the right people. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah wiped tears. Robert grinned like he'd won a landmark case. Marcus, always ready, captured the entire moment on camera, already planning the most viral wedding video ever. When they finally pulled apart, Damien leaned close and whispered in Lena's ear. There's one more proposal I want to make. She looked at him, curious. I think you should finish law school. Lena pulled back, startled. Damien, I don't need a diploma. No, you don't, he said. But you deserve one. You deserve that recognition. And I want you to have every door open to you. But what about Miguel? Work? Time? We'll figure it out, he said. Your mom already offered to help more. We'll adjust your schedule. What matters is that you get to choose. She was quiet for a moment, eyes full of wonder. You really think I should? I think you should do what feels right. But I also think you deserve the choice. And if I agree, she said, you can't rush me, and you can't make it easier. I promise, he said, smiling. You'll earn that degree the way you've done everything else, in your own way with your brilliance and grit. Lena nodded, tears in her eyes again. Then I'll do it. I'll finish law school, even if it's hard. I've done harder. And this time I won't be doing it alone. The following Monday, Lena was already on the phone with the law school registrar, asking about re-enrollment. Carmen, beaming with pride, agreed to help with Miguel and declared it was time Lena finished what she started. For the first time, Lena saw clearly. Being in a partnership didn't mean dependency. It meant building a life where both their dreams could grow. 6 months later, the most unique wedding Chicago had ever seen took place. Right in the same community center where Damien had learned what real justice looked like. The decorations weren't from luxury vendors. They were handmade with love. Carmen had organized neighbors who transformed the small auditorium into something magical. There were flowers from Mrs. Rose's garden, lights strung by local electricians, fabric borrowed from the seamstress who tailored Lena's dress. Even the plastic chairs were adorned with bright cloth ribbons. Instead of fancy catering, A long community table overflowed with homemade dishes, each family bringing something special. Damien arrived early, adjusting his simple suit. Sarah, watching him with a smile, would later describe his expression as a man who finally found his place. The crowd was a beautiful mix. Lawyers sat next to janitors. Wealthy clients shared stories with retirees. Law students laughed beside neighborhood kids. And of course, Marcus filmed every second. When the music began, curated by Miguel, Damien took his place at the altar, hands steady for the first time in years. The doors opened. Lena walked in arm with Miguel. Her dress was simple, white, perfect. Her hair fell naturally with a single sunflower, Miguel's idea. "You shine like the sun, Mom," he had said. Miguel wore a navy blue suit, holding the ring pillow with solemn pride. His serious face made half the room laugh through their tears. When Lena reached the altar, Miguel handed the rings to Professor Marchesi, the same man who lent her first law books. Before the vows, Lena held Damien's hands and turned to the guests. "For a long time," she said, "people knew me as the cleaning lady who knew the law, and that's okay. I do clean things." The room chuckled softly. "But over the years, I realized I wasn't just cleaning floors. I was cleaning away judgments, my own and others. Judgments about what makes someone smart, successful, worthy." She looked at Damien, her voice steady. "And I helped someone very special clean away his too. About leadership, about love, about what it really means to be happy." In the front row, Carmen wiped her tears. Mrs. Rosa waved her handkerchief. Sarah and Robert exchanged glances, deeply moved. Then, as the rings were brought forward, Miguel whispered something to Damien, picked up by the mic. "Now you're our assistant too, okay?" The room burst into laughter. Damien knelt to meet him eye to eye. "Deal. But can we discuss my salary?" "Sure," Miguel replied. "But I don't take money. Only ice cream and trips to the park." Another round of laughter, sealed with a solemn handshake. When Lena and Damien finally kissed, flower petals rained down, thrown by giggling kids. The kiss was long, sweet, and full of promises that didn't need legal contracts to be honored. As music filled the air, and stories, laughter, and food were shared, Lena and Damien stepped aside for a moment, soaking it all in. "Any regrets?" he whispered. "Marrying you?" "Never," she smiled. "Doing it here with everyone probably forming opinions?" She shook her head. "No, because now, they're our family. And family looks out for each other." Damien kissed her again, certain of one thing. He hadn't just found a wife. He'd found home. A life where intelligence meant sharing, not competing. Where success was lifting others. And where happiness was as simple as holding hands with a woman he admired, while negotiating ice cream deals with a 6-year-old boy who now called him assistant. What did you think of Lena and Damien's story? Let us know in the comments. Backhand index pointing right on a scale of 0 to 10. How would you rate this love story? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to keep up with more powerful, real-life inspired stories. Sparkles, and if you're still smiling, check out the next story right here.